First of all, thank you for the warm welcome. I really needed it. From California, so coming to the weather here, from that cold weather outside, the warm welcome was good. Thank you for the kind words that you said about me. I'm so happy that the gathering here, the annual gathering that is happening every year, is the family gathering. And in every center, such an event takes place during this winter. I think that is the best time for fundraising, because at the end of the year, those who want to give for such charity, they can earmark it for such a program or such an event. Except that we don't accept 500 rupees and 1,000 rupees. You can save it for Indian trip. The topic that we have chosen today to discuss is mindful action and mindless meditation. Why we chose this topic is because somebody asked me this question some time back. What happens to our mind, Swamiji, in meditation? And how does it suddenly disappear when we want it? So I said that is the whole ball game. Presently, our condition is mindless action and mindful meditation. When we are acting, we are mindless, but when we are in meditation, full of mind. Just the opposite has to happen. So that's when I thought that this will be a most appropriate thing to discuss. First and foremost is, let us understand mind in two ways. In the language of Sanskrit, we always divide any word, broadly speaking, into two parts. One in the form of a noun, another again in the form of a verb. Karma, when you take the word karma, it's both a noun and a verb. Kr is the dhatu. I'm not teaching Sanskrit here. The idea is, which itself takes the form of karma, itself is karoti. In the same way, mind is both a noun and a verb. In what way? Let us look at it. As a noun, it is a faculty that we have. In our Gurudev's BMI chart, there are three equipments: body, mind, and intellect. So mind is considered as a faculty, an equipment. It is said in scientific terms, it is considered as a collection of consciousness which has the function of thinking, feeling, planning, awareful, knowing. So that as a faculty we all have, and we are proud to have that. As a verb, it is being mindful, being careful, being attentive. So don't we say to your children, be mindful about what you're doing, be mindful when you're studying. That is when we apply the mind. So as a noun, it is aptitude, and as a verb, it is attitude. Attitude in the right sense. Nowadays, when somebody is in attitude, I'm not meaning that. How you use your mind is the attitude. But the faculty of thinking is there, that is aptitude, a skill. So when we look at it from that angle, we have two functions. That is, as it has a faculty, it's like breathing. Do you do anything for that? Do you do anything for breathing? You don't need to do anything, it happens. Do you do anything for digesting your food? It happens. So, from the highest standpoint, mind is something happening, whether you want it or not. But when we take it to a verb, we have a choice to take it in the right direction with the right attitude, or we can use it for a totally different purpose, like worrying. Mind does that part also, worrying. So, we have to recognize how to use that in the workplace, how to use it in our transactional world. And that, when we do it carefully, that is called mindful working. Bhagavan Sri Krishna in his Gita specifically brings this point. Upanishads also talk about it, and the Upanishads consider the mind as the only impediment between us and realization. Mana eva manushyanam karanam bandha mokshayoho. First and foremost statement made in Amritavindha Upanishad. Mind alone is the cause for bondage as well as for liberation. Bandhaya vishaya saktam moksham nirvishayam smritam. When the mind is caught up in the objects, it is bondage. When it is free of that, is liberation. So therefore, we are given a choice whether to use this mind for the sake of liberation, or let it be happening, engaging in the world like any animals would do, just for the sake of enjoying the pleasures, seeking for happiness in the world, and continue to get all the stress and strain of life, then obviously it is a bondage. That is the reason why in Kathopanishad also, mind is given a very particular role, as it is stated in the Upanishad, which is basically taken by Gita Acharya in portraying the entire scene of Mahabharata war. In the Katha Upanishad it is said, the body is a chariot. Probably many of you have come across this in Katha Upanishad. Swamiji might have given talks on that as well. This individual who is there is the owner of this chariot called the body. Atmanam ratinam viddhi shariram ratamevatu. As I was looking at this picture, I was remembering that. Here. Who is the owner of this chariot? Who is the owner of this chariot? Arjun. You all agree? Arjun is the chariot owner. And that he is referred as Atma here in the sense of an individual. Atmanam ratinam viddhi shariram ratamevatu. The body is the chariot. And how the chariots are being taken? Obviously by the horses. But who is driving the horses? Buddhim tu saratim viddhi. Your intellect is the sarati, the driver there. Mana pragrahamevacha. Mind is the reins. Connecting what? With the horses. Indriyani hayanahuhu. Indriyani, the sense organs, are the horses. Vishayan teshu gocharan. The world is the path. So all the elements are taken care of now. Of course, Hanuman is not mentioned. Chariot is the body. Owner of the chariot is the ego, the individual in us. The Sarati, the one who is driving the chariot, is our intellect buddhi. Horses are the sense organs. Road is this world. The reins connecting the horses with the buddhi is the mind. Now, why it is important is that if the buddhi does not have the hold of that reins, what happens? How many horses are there? Look at it. How many faculties, how many sense organs you have? 4, no? 5. Which is one is missing here? Eyes, ears, nose, tongue. What is missing? Skin. Actually, skin is in a particular place or an entire body. That's why it is not mentioned. Only 4 are there. 5th one is understood. So all these 4 horses plus 1, which is included in all of them, are the sense organs which are running, and they cannot run unless properly directed by the Sarathi. If they are on their own, then each one will go in different direction. So what is that which is connecting the wisdom with the sense organ? Mind. If that is not under our control, horses will not be controlled. Therefore, unless we have the clear idea about where we want to go, you cannot direct the sense organs to that direction. So the buddhi must have the clear understanding of where to go. Then use the horses with the help of the reins, go to that point. In the same way, mind is a tool if we know what the goal is. Please note. Mind is the tool. The faculty efficiently can be used, mindfully used, only if the goal is clear. If the goal is not clear, mind will act on its own, then it will go all over the place. Therefore, Bhagavan Krishna in the 6th chapter, in the beginning itself, he said, if you want to meditate, you should have already practiced Karma Yoga. Arurukshor Munir Yogam Karma Karanam Uchyate Yoga Rodasya Tasyaiva Shama Karanam Uchyate. If you are interested in having a control over yourself or meditation, you must have already performed Karma Yoga. That means you must have engaged in the world productively, knowing exactly what you want in the world. Now, all of you are professionals. You have already engaged in your studying in your subject, and then you have come to a particular position in your life, and you are already becoming a professional in this form of successful one. No doubt. But then the question is, have you used the intellect or the mind only for the purpose of aggrandizing from the world outside, or for the sake of a higher purpose in life? Gurudev always said, Chinmaya Mission is a school for giving you the right direction towards God. It's a learning place for us to understand what life is, and then individually we have to work for it. It's only a place where you give an opportunity to learn and to practice. So why are you here otherwise? You will be in a professional meeting. You are not. You are here because your children are here because of a different goal to set in our life. More than our professional goals, more than our personal goals, more than our social goals. It's more of a spiritual goal. And only when we determine our spiritual goal, you see the power of mindfulness. That is why it is said in Gita and many other places also, only when you have the clear spiritual goal, then Nitya Naimittikam Karma, Nitya and daily and obligatory duties are to be done. Sada Atma Vishuddhaye. This is how in Naishkarmya Siddhi beautifully it is given. Then your daily activities are directed towards purifying your mind, leading to spiritual goal called liberation. Otherwise, mindfulness, as we generally know, is about focusing on a job, focusing what is required for the job, getting it done, achieving. That all of us know who are successful. One successful person was asked this question, how did you become successful? He said, I took the right decision at the right time. Oh, wow, that's a nice secret to know. How did you take right decision at the right time? Experience. How did we get the experience? Wrong decisions. So, do we have to go by the route of wrong decisions to get learned and then go for the right decision? No, not necessary. Yes, it is necessary for our professional successes. Yes. But scriptures are given to us, like Gita and Upanishad are given to us to give us the right direction right in the beginning itself. Don't do this. That's why Krishna also says, Tasmat Shastram Pramanam Te Karya Akarya Bhavastita. To know what is to be done and what not to be done, you don't want to go anywhere else. Don't ask anybody else. Shastram Eva Pramanam. There is already a written matter. So, when we have a spiritual goal in our mind, then we recognize everything that is prescribed there in the Shastras as what is to be done, what not to be done. They are all so useful to us. Somebody asked me this question, if everything is taken care by the Lord, because the usual trend is what the people think, Swamiji, if what I have to get mukti, I will ask Bhagavan, he will give me. I don't need to do anything. If that is the case, why should he talk 700 verses in Bhagavad Gita? Or what? If he can take care of it, then why should he even discuss about it? Is it not to Arjuna? Arjuna asked this question, what is the right thing to do right now? Tell me. I am in the battlefield and I do not know whether to fight or not to fight. What is correct thing to do? Please tell me. Don't worry, I will take care of it. If that is the case, there is no discussion. But all the Upanishads, the entire Bhagavad Gita is a set of instructions to follow, and at the end of it, Bhagavan gives freedom also, saying, Yata Ichchasita Thakur. Now, I have told you, then you have to take a decision. No forcing. So, it is given to us that these are the right things to do for us, provided our goal is a spiritual nature. Yogina karma kurvanti sangam tektva atma shuddhaye. So, mindfulness is not for external productivity. It is not proving how great I am in my work, but it is for purifying my mind. It is for cleansing my mind so that it is ready to become mindless in the meditation. Karma and Shama. Karma in the form of mindfully doing our work. Shama is getting rid of the mind. You cannot get rid of the mind unless it is purified. First is Shuddhi and then the Mukti. This is a peculiar thing. Anyway, I am going to get rid of the mind. Why should I make it clean? Do you ask that question? Your children will ask this question. When you have your teenager at home and he gets up in the morning, late morning, not early morning, late morning, and he gets up and then you tell him, hey, set right your bed, put your bed in proper order. Again I am going to sleep in the night, why should I do this? Would they ask that question? And what's your answer? Yes, good, do that only. No, even though you are going to do the same thing in the night, again you are going to sleep, but during the daytime you just keep it clean. When I was studying, there was one student along with me, and his room was full of mess, all the papers. He's a very good student. I won't tell you the name. Very good student, and he is so studious, and everywhere books and papers and all over the place. And when I went to his room and I looked at him, my God, this is how you keep your room. So he said, what's wrong with this? He didn't see anything wrong in that. And he would sleep on the books. I said, why don't you keep all of them in one place so that you can easily access? No, I can also access also. No, but you know where, what is in this mess, how will you even find out?
He looked at me, are you so concerned? Yes. Then you do it. Your child also will do the same thing. One lady, one mother, she got very upset with her son being so, careless. So she cleaned his room and then put a small note there on his table. Next time, whenever I see an object on the floor, I will charge you $1 for that. Every time you pick up anything from the floor on your Next day she went, it was again mess, but there was a note there, dear mom, here is $20. Pick up. So if you ask this question, if I have to get rid of the mind in meditation, why should I make it pure? Unless you make your mind clean, it cannot be gotten rid of. And that impurity of mind is not wrong thinking, thinking itself. And now we'll come to that point. So, mindfulness is not just becoming efficient, though that is a byproduct. Mindfulness is not just focusing on what you do, though it is also true. Mindfulness is not accomplishing what you want in a given period of time, shorter than earlier. As you become efficient, you can achieve things much faster than otherwise it would take because of mind's distraction here and there, no doubt. Here, the mindfulness is not for becoming efficient, doing things quickly, or doing it focusingly. No. It is to turn it inward. Thereby, reducing the number of thoughts. That is mindfulness. From many thoughts to few thoughts. Though external object, when you focus on, definitely helps. But then, that is called concentration. But very mind which is externally focusing is turned inward, that is called contemplation. So the intention of Bhagavan Sri Krishna in Gita talking about Karma Yoga is not just to become efficient in the world outside. Though the statement Yoga Karmasu Kausalam literally means yoga is efficiency in action. Then our Gurudev used to say that even a pickpocketer in Madras bus is also a yogi. He focuses very clearly on your pocket. Only that in his mind. As you get into the bus, he also picks up, he also goes there. And with this blade in his hand, efficiently works behind it. Make sure that your purse is taken. He has been doing for 25 years. He's become expert. Yoga Karma Sukhausana. That's not what he's talking about there. So, even though in our workplace we do think that if I consciously work and focusingly I work and efficiently work, I accomplish a lot of success out of what I do. No doubt that is true. But Krishna talks about making your action itself a joyful affair, not the result there. Your action itself should satisfy you, not the result that comes later. And action itself become a fulfillment only when my mind is not anxious about the result. Action itself is a joyful engagement because I am not worried about what results would come. If I am not worried about what the results have to come, then what it means is I am not interested in gaining anything from outside. I am trying to find happiness within that very action itself, which means I want to be free. So unless that focus is there, this mindfulness which is spoken in Gita is useless. So in management seminars and other places, they talk about the Karma Yoga for successful people, Karma Yoga for today's businessmen. We smilingly accept, okay, that much only they know. But unless we gain that vision of ultimate goal, true mindfulness, which is spoken in Bhagavad Gita, will not be understood. Yogina karma kurvanti sangam tektva Atma Shuddhaye. That's why even in the third chapter, when children were chanting that, Asakta Sarva, they were saying, Asakto hi acharan karma paramapnodi purusha. When a person engages in the world detachedly, such a person gains the highest. Siddhya siddhyo samau bodhva samatvam yoga uchyate. There, siddhi and asiddhi. Both has to be seen equally. Alright. Now, when it comes to seat of meditation, this mind which has become relatively quiet, for it has not become too anxious about the result, it has been used in this world for working efficiently and slowly turned inward with a focus on the final goal. It has gained a certain amount of inner quietude. Such a mind, when it comes to the seat of meditation, it has become shama. From karma to shama. From mindful to mindless.
Yogarudasya tasyaiva, tasya yoginah eva, karma, shama karanamucchate. That the quietude becomes a means. Now this is where we come to the serious part of understanding what the mind is. See, Ramana Maharshi used to say, mind is a notion. When the self forgets itself and identifies with the body. When I forget myself, my real self, and identify with the body, first thing that happens is the mind.
So mind as such doesn't exist without the thought of the body. This is very interesting to think about. All of you go to sleep, right? Not now. Now when you go to sleep, ask this question, what is sleeping or who is sleeping? Tell me who is sleeping. Not now, again. If you are sleeping, you will not be able to answer me. Who sleeps? Body? And that will be a very wrong answer. Your body is functioning much more efficiently at the time. All that food, dinner that you eat here. Do you think a body is sleeping? Poor thing. 365 days a year, until you die, it is continuously working. You will not be getting running and jumping, and that's not what is called active body. When you quiet down, lie down, body is actively working. How do you get old otherwise? How do your hair grow? How is your nail growing? Does the nail grow in the night or not? Check up. Actually, in the night it grows faster. Those who are small children will know that. Overnight that fellow is grown. The body is functioning. Breathing is going on or not. Digestion is going on. Blood circulation is going on. Only your brain is not functioning. If it is not there, it's not functioning. But everything else is going on. Sweating is there, body is growing, nails are growing, hair is growing. My hair doesn't grow properly. But then everything is happening. Body is not sleeping. Okay, the body is not. Who is sleeping? Ego. You are the self, Paramatma is also not sleeping. Because when you wake up next day, you know that you slept. That awareness is there. The one who is absent in sleep is the one which is waking up in the morning. So what is sleeping? What is not there in sleep? Tell me. Your thinking mind is not there. So that means you have been experiencing everyday mindlessness. Correct? Now, so long as there is body awareness, there is mind. When the body awareness is not there, mind is not there. In other words, mind and awareness of the body simultaneously arise. नह्यस्य विद्या मनसो विदिरिक्ता मनोह्य विद्या भवबन्ध हेतुः तस्मिन् विनष्टे सकलं विनष्टं विजृम्भितेऽस्मिन् सकलं विजृम्भते. When it is not there, the world is not there. When it wakes up, everything comes there. All that what you have planned and postponed for next day is not there in the sleep. The moment you wake up in the morning, everything comes back. That is called manolaya. According to Ramana Maharshi, it is called manolaya. The absence of the mind, not the destruction of the mind. So we are familiar with what is called manolaya. We are familiar with the mindless state. Not that it is not, we don't know, we know it. Only thing is, in sleep it happens by itself. In meditation, you make it happen. That is the difference. You make it happen. And that is the process. How? Now the question is raised, how is that mind, which is actively functioning in the world outside when we are engaging in the world, can be made absent at will? By choice. So that means a person who is enlightened, one who has gained the higher level of consciousness, by choice he can keep the mind absent? Yes. In that case, how does he interact with the world? Does he not interact with the world? He does. In that condition, his mind is at the minimum state of function. He gives the example just like a bullock cart which is taken to a marketplace with all the produce that farmer had made a lot of things, and then he goes to the next village to put it in the farmer's market and then selling off all the things that he has got, and then he sold most of the things, and then at the end of the day, in the evening when he returns back to his village, he is so tired and he gets into his bullock cart, falls asleep. What does the bullock cart do? What the bullocks do? What does it do? Stay there only. It knows the way back, even though there is no driver. So is the life of a Mahatma. He doesn't do. Just now he chanted, Naiva tasya kridenartaha. There is nothing that he has to gain in this world. Na kridene kastana. Not doing or not doing doesn't matter to him. And so, we have to intellectually first of all appreciate that idea first. Mindless state of a meditator is where he allows things to happen without any attempt to engage in anything. And that reducing his engagement with the mind, slowly, he comes to a point, mind is on its own. Now, let me clarify this point a little carefully. How does it work? Bhagavan Krishna in many places says it's a threefold process. First is Titiksha, second is Samatva, third is Nirdvandvatva. Titiksha means where things that are not under your control, don't complain about it. Matra sparshastha kaunteya Shridoshna sukhadukkadaha agamapayino anityaha tan titikshasya. Whenever we are in touch with the world outside, when we are in contact with the world outside, there is no doubt things that I like, things I don't like. Shida Ushna, Sukha Dukkha, joy and sorrow, heat and cold, they give only when you are coming in contact with the world. Sukha Dukkha Daha, Agamaha Apayinaha, they come and go. Tanti Dikshasva, bear it. That's the first way or first attempt on reducing your mind to reducing your mental activity. If you look at yourself, most of the time the complaints are about, I don't like this, I don't like that, I want it this way, I want it that way. So the insistence of how everything should happen, that is active presence of mind. Active presence of mind's idiosyncrasies. It is not becoming passive, please understand. It may look as though a person has become passive about, okay, let it happen. Oh, it is sweet, it's okay. Cold, it's okay. Joy, it's okay. No. He is actively pursuing to be free. Not what we do, we are actively pursuing to be bounded by what is happening around outside. Is it not true? When we insist upon what a thing should be, how a thing should be, we are actually becoming bound. Because they are deciding what I should be. Whereas an individual who has thus come to understand how to reduce the intensity of the mind, he has actively pursued freedom. I want to be free of this. Let not the world outside, which has its own continuous changing nature of good and bad, right and wrong, all these things cannot affect me, should not. Even though I am in touch with the world that is outside. That's why Krishna again puts it point. This nature of identifying with the mind and engaging according to whims is called sin. Sin is not committing murder. Sin is taking mind too seriously. Sukha dukkhe same kritva labha labho jaya jayo tato yuddhaya vichasva naivam papa bhavamsis. What is papa in that? What is sin in looking for happiness, looking for success, looking for comfort? Is why, from the standpoint of freedom, that is a bondage. So, as I said, if our goal is freedom, mind is an obstacle. And so, purifying the mind is only to reduce its intensity, reality, and finally come to know it has no reality. As long as I give importance to it, it becomes very strong. For example, how many of you want Starbucks coffee now? How many of them are thinking me, I am. We will give it to you after this talk. Now, once I put that thought in your mind, you will look for when is he going to end the talk. Seriously, we are giving Starbucks coffee. No, once that thought has come in your mind, every word that I utter, after that there is a thought, coffee. So therefore, I am going to conclude coffee. So this thought came from where? From me? Is that thought came to you about Starbucks coffee from me? Yes or no? Yes. No. Many of you who never had Starbucks coffee would not think about it. So actually, where the coffee thought coming from? From yourself only. I only triggered it. I am only a catalyst. The source is you. If somebody doesn't drink coffee, he doesn't care. Just like when you walk through, when you come out of the international airport in Bombay or in Bangalore, etc., there is an aisle full of spirituality. You see that? Bottles of spirituality. Huh? I am not affected by that. I walk through that. Really, yeah. I don't care. I walk. But anybody else who has found some joy in that will stop there. Once I was coming to some nights in Bangalore from somewhere, so I came through the aisle and I was walking through and I was going out. Next to me there was another person whom I know, not remember him. So this person came and then suddenly he stopped talking. I think I left my bag inside. You go ahead, I will just finish it. I know why it's good. I didn't say anything. In some places they write duty free. Meaning what? If you are highly spiritual, you have no duty. नैवल्यस्य हृदयार्थ नैव किंचित करोमि युक्तो मन्येत तत्त्ववित्. Anyway, where do we take that? Where this thing from? Start. So the thought, if you take seriously the thought, that will haunt you. Is it not true? Any thought, if you seriously consider that is real, then it will not go until you act on it. Why we give reality to the thought? Because we have no vision to be free. If you want to be free, then give no importance to the thought. But we can't, because we have been doing the wrong thing from this context. We have been taking our mind seriously, not only our mind, everybody's mind seriously. That's another problem. Why is she saying this? Why is he doing that? What is your opinion about me? Many people think that everybody is thinking about you. This is not true. Many people say that everybody is thinking about me. Go and ask, are you thinking about you? What? I never thought about you. Let us say that you are wearing a new dress for the first time. Would you not look for everybody to look at you? You think that they are looking at you. No, they are looking at you to find out whether you are looking at them. Funny people we are. No, I am wearing this for the second time. I am looking how many of them are maybe noticing. Anyway. So, when we take our mind too seriously, it haunts you. And unless that thought is fulfilled, you will not rest content. Slowly recognize mind is nothing but a notion, a fathom entity there. And it is absent. Every day it becomes absent. Every night it becomes absent. It's not there. And what is your condition when it is not there? Not only you are peaceful, rest of the world is also peaceful. When you are not there. Huh? Is it not that when you are not there, world is more peaceful? What will happen to the world? Nothing. Everything will go fine. Don't worry about it. I am afraid to think that if I am not there, things will go fine. Then what's my role? Anyway, so don't take that too seriously. Your mind, though it has a purposefulness in working in the world, for a man who has this who does not have this knowledge, mind alone is the reality. I'm telling you. Is it not people are dictated by what the thoughts are there? It's criminal thoughts are there. For a person who does not have the vision of the freedom, vision of reality, vision of moksha, for him or her, the mind is the only reality. And given the reality to the mind, the world is the one which dictates terms to us. The moment you falsify your mind, you see the world change. That this is only a thought. There's no reality. Consciously practice that. It has no reality. I have the choice to give reality or not. It's my choice. Somebody said something. So what? If you are going on the road, I say, hey fool, come here. And if you respond, whose problem is that? How dare you call me fool? Oh, it is you. I can't do that. Who asked you to respond? By responding, you are proving yourself to be one. So the world can throw anything on you. Why should you take it seriously? The world includes your body. It has its own peculiarities. It has its own demands. Yes, you need to take care of it, but don't take it too seriously. So that a Mahatma lives in this world, he is also interacting with the world with the help of the mind, but not taking it seriously. So Ramana Maharshi would say that once you recognize this fathom nature of the mind, then the question is, where is the origin of that mind? Where does it originate? And he would say, it comes from the first thought that you have get as soon as you wake up, I. That I is called ego. So there is no ego if there is no mind. In the sleep, when you keep the next fellow, not knowingly, you are not punishable. Is it not true? Your child is kicking you. Will you punish that child? He doesn't know. Why? No ego. So when you are not intentionally doing an act, it is not called a crime. It's not considered as a punishment, to be punished. Why? Because at that point, your action has no intention. The ego is not. Whereas when you are actively present, wakeful time, when you do an action, yes, there is a karta there behind you. The karta is the ego. So he says the moment you wake up, first thought that arises, even that which wakes you up is ego. The I thought. Before it arises, ask the question, what was there before? Before this thought came, what was there before? Who was I? Was I not there? If I was not there, who knew that I slept? What makes me know that I slept? What makes me enjoy that state of mindlessness? So there is something which is present on the background, which is aware, which, when forgotten, arises the individual. So the attempt of a meditator in meditation is to bring the minimum thoughts to one single thought, many thoughts to few thoughts to single thought, and then finally that also we drop. This attempting to drop that one single thought of I is at the same time a self-effort, at the same time it's a surrender. That's the beauty of it. You want to renounce, you attempt to renounce, and you realize you cannot. And that time, when you attempt to renounce and you cannot, because the one who is trying to renounce is the one to be renounced. That state is called surrender. I give up. In the book, that's why I'm coming to the book, Life of I, because I have to market that also. So the journey of I am lost to I is lost. From I am lost, meaning I don't know what to do, similar to Arjuna's condition. I am gone, I am destroyed, I am depressed, I am a failure. To I is lost. So then that is the sadhana. Any reading, any japa, any puja, any ritual that you do finally has to come to this point of losing the individual. Now in the world outside, when we say individuality should be lost, you say, are you crazy? Without individuality, how do you become successful? How do you prove yourself? Yes. As I said, if you do not have a spiritual goal in mind, these are all very important. I want to prove myself, I want to be successful, I want to be praised, my books have to be published, my name has to come in the papers, everybody should talk about me, I should go up in the ladder. Yes, do it. But at some point of time you realize, actually I am not happy with all this. Then when you seek the real happiness, when you seek the true joy, when you seek the true liberation, you start internalizing your focus. So that is the journey. And that journey is called sadhana. the spiritual practice. And it happens so silently within you. Nobody else outside would even notice it. No need to. Because it is all about how I am handling my own mind, my own thoughts. How seriously I am working with this. How seriously I am caught in this web of thoughts. And how important it is for me to let go. How important for me to falsify the thoughts. How important for me to not to take my mind too seriously. Let the thought be. If it is necessary, I'll pursue. If it is not, drop it. And that slowly, when one practices. And as I said, Titiksha is the first one, Samatvam is the next one. Being same in different conditions, and finally comes Sri Krishna says, Nirdvatvatvam. Even though dualities are not there, neither day is true nor the night is true. Dharma is true, neither the dharma is true, nor adharma is true. Good is not true, equally is bad is not true. These are two sides of the same coin. If you take the coin, there should be two sides, definitely. In the world, these two coins are two sides of the coin, so definitely yes. But when it comes to the higher level of consciousness, both of them have no meaning. That's when Nachiketa asked the question. Anyatra dharmat, anyatra adharmat, anyatra asmat, krita akrita, anyatra bodhacha bhavyacha, yattat pashyasi, tatvada. Please tell me that which is beyond dharma and adharma, beyond good and bad, beyond today and tomorrow. What is it? Is the day comes first or night comes first? Okay, the moon comes first or the sun comes first? Tell me. Moon or sun? One person said, definitely moon. Why? Before anyone knows the sun. Okay. That's a totally different question answer. Nowadays that is also possible. So, the duality, if you take one real, other has to be. Now what we do is, we want everything good in our life. We mean to say, bad never will happen. Always day. We mean to say, night never happen. It will be there. If you take one seriously, you have to suffer the other one seriously. If you take one as unreal, other one will fall flat. It will not be so serious. Life and death, right and wrong, good and bad, success and failure, all these things are to be taken at the relative level. One is true, other is true, one is false, other is also false. Then you rise beyond that. That is when mind loses its prominence. If you are looking for people to respect you, adore you, praise you, you can't stand in self. Is it not true? You go to a place where everybody knows you, everybody respects you, fine. You go to a place nobody knows you, what is your condition? Nobody is caring about me because you have been looking for respect and reverence. Janakripa naishturyam utsrucheta. Shankaracharya says, leave behind this kripa and naishturyam. Both are false. But that requires you to have a longing for freedom. Then mindlessness is necessary. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak to you. I'll stop here. If you have any questions, please do ask me. You have 10 minutes. Yeah, please, when you are writing your question, write your name also. Because I remember as an incident with Gurudev, I don't know how many of you have told this before also sometime. Once when I was Yogendra student, Gurudev was giving question answer session. So I was secretary at that time. I was busy organizing things. One of my friends who is not a part of Yogendra, he came to me. I invited him to listen to Gurudev. So he came and said, I have a question to ask. Can I ask? Yeah, you can ask. And then he wrote a question with put my name. And Gurudev is very particular. If you are asking question, the name should be there and you should be present. So Gurudev was answering questions and he picked up that question. First he read out my name. I was wondering, why I didn't ask any question. And he knew me. He looked at me. Oh, you are here. Okay. Swamiji, why do we talk about old, outdated Ramayana, Bhagavatam, Gita and all that? Let us not talk something useful today. He looked at me. You mean everything is outdated, old and useless? Then tomorrow onward, don't eat. Your grandfather did it. You don't do it. Don't take bath. Grandfather did it. Great grandfather did. Why do you need to do it? He blasted me for the next 10 minutes. Write your own name. Don't write your wife's name or somebody else you don't like. Sriram. That you? Yeah. See, you have to show your face. Sriram. Name not answer. Sriram, anybody else? So, question. Swamiji, how do you not get attached to the results of your action and yet not become inefficient and imagine. Is it who? What is the last word? Inefficient and uncaring. Uncaring. Okay. See, Gurudev has said that while planning you have to think about yourself, not while working. You cannot do any action without thinking about the result. While planning, think about the result. Because otherwise, how do you plan? How do you plan for anything? Prayojanam anudishya gunaha vina pravartate. A fool even cannot work if he is not thinking about the result. But while working, don't be anxious about the result. So, that's why he would say, work out your plan, plan out your work. Plan out your work, work out your work. So it's not that a person is not thinking about the result, but he plans for it very well. While executing, he is not anxious. Like this program is planned for many days or months, right? But if everything is rightly planned, there is nothing anxious about it. It just goes on. Your efficiency indeed increases. Why? Because your mind is fully available to do anything. If you have planned well and not anxious about the result. So the indifference towards the result comes only when the result you are seeking is within you, which is hidden within you. So then external result doesn't disturb you. That's what it means. But that comes out of slowly evolving to see. I don't worry about external result. I'm more interested in how calm and quiet and efficient I am at working itself. I think he prepared this at home itself. Paper is different. No name. No name. Neelakanta. What are the symptoms that shows that the mind is purified permanently? Uday. Is it Uday? VYTH. Vaidehi Nilak. Vaiti. Oh, Vaiti. The symptoms that the mind is purified is at will you can be at peace. There is no external aid for you to become calm and quiet and peaceful. Your mind is capable of being peaceful. That's what it says, Shanto Dantaha Nivasanti Santaha Vasantavat Loke Hitam Charantaha. Men of wisdom are those people who are Shantaha, Dantaha,
Meaning, fully under their control, the mind and the senses.
Nivasanti, they stay like the spring season, which when it comes, it's all so joyful. So, men of wisdom are those who are capable, purified mind. They are capable of being at peace no matter where they are. So, you don't depend upon external things to make them at ease. Kumar, how do you practice Karma Yoga when you have family obligations? College funds for kids, retirement planning. You have such a planning. Good. Planning is necessary. As I said now. So, family obligations, yes, one has to take care. But we must always realize one thing. However much you take care of it, there is something else more bothered about taking care of your family than you. Bhagavan is there. And we always think that I am the provider, I have to take care of everything. You must do necessary, but not overly anxious about it. So when we become overly anxious, we are preoccupied with that. So when you are applying for a job, we ask a name, first name, last name, gender, etc. When it comes to occupation, you should always put preoccupied. That's what we are. So we should not be too preoccupied with that. There are necessary things to be taken care. So we are too concerned about that, then we will have no time for ourselves. See, I always think that Vedanta tells us this. We are born here for self-correction. We are given an opportunity to correct ourselves. And if we fail to do that, we have to come back again and again. With the different families all the time, every time. How many families you have to take care? Not in this life, but I'm saying. How many families you have taken care in the past? How many families you have to take care in the future? There's no end to it. Yes, I have to do my best. Leave the rest. You have to find. See, it is like playing a role in a drama theatre or whatever. You play the role, but once in a while you have to let go of your role and be a soul. If you are only playing the role, when do you get the time to be you? You forget that you are a soul, you are only a role then. Then when you are only the role, you are going through roller coaster. So one has to know when to stop. In my day-to-day life, this is Sanju Kadam Seti. You must be a doctor. Nothing I can understand. And that's what he wrote it up. You know that. Who is this Kadam Seti? Oh, your question. This side is the place where you write. This side is not. Checker. Anyway, I can read, I think. In my day-to-day life, I am able to recognize when I lose control and allow my mind, emotions to take over. How can I strengthen the control of my intellect to overcome the mind? See, conviction is the one which actually makes the control possible. See, like for example, if various kinds of food that are going to be offered here, I hope so, So now, if I'm healthy, conscious of health, if I'm convinced that I must eat the right thing, even if I'm given what? Wrong, sorry. I thought you were bringing me something to eat. Even if you are bringing me something which is very oily and things like that, I will not take it. Why? I'm conscious that I cannot take that. That's not right for me. So intellect works on conviction. Gurudev always says, if you are convinced, it is easy to control the mind. If you are not convinced, you will be taken for the ride. So intellectual conviction is necessary. Manasastu para buddhi. It is said in Gita itself, 3rd chapter. Manasastu para buddhi. Buddhi is para, manasaha. Then the mind, buddhi is greater. And why it is greater? Because it can control the mind. So conviction is necessary. Ramita Diwan, how can we maintain professional goals while also working towards spiritual goals? How can we excel at all tasks while reducing the role of our mind? Ramita? See, our Guruji has written a book called Tips to Happiness. Right? You've seen that book? Jivan Darshan is called. In that book he has given that your spiritual goal and material goal should somewhere align. One is called Charama Lakshyam. Pratama Lakshyam and Charama Lakshyam, meaning immediate goal and ultimate goal must have some alignment. If you want to go towards LA, don't travel towards east. Right or wrong? So if your goal is to reach a spiritual goal, find out whether your professional goal will align with that. If you are not interested in spiritual goal, then it doesn't matter. Right? So, while fixing your professional goal, make sure that it does not come in your way towards spiritual goal. But there is no other magic here. There is no other way you can do it. So make sure that your professional goals do not make you lose your peace, inner peace and inner tranquility. And you have to constantly check that. So when during the weekends when you are not working, nowadays there is nothing called not working. Everybody is given a cell phone. Keep working. So Swamiji, in our office they gave me a laptop, they have given free of this phone, all to make you work 24 hours. At some point of time, you should leave away your phone and the laptop and say, now, let me think about where am I going. If you don't do that, then obviously that will consume you completely. So definitely you should make these two align with each other. Then you will see that definitely progress is possible, and more importantly, you must take stock of things every hour. At the end, Gurudev used to say, at the end of the day, look back in your daily life and see where and all you missed, where and all you slipped, where and all you lost control, where you could have done and taken a better decision, where you had gone because of your passion or fancy, out of your own mental preoccupation. So you keep track of it. If we don't do it very often, we'll be lost for a long time. And getting back our inner strength is not easy. It's like about, as I said, that if you are aware of the need to be healthy, you have to start from eating correct food onwards, right? And doing your daily workout properly. Sudiksha. Nobody is asking questions from this side. Only them. Who's the same. A sincere, hardworking professional may have lots on his mind, what to do, improve, take care of, etc. How to reduce these thoughts to quieten your mind. There is no malice or evil intention, but the mind is active. Yeah, no doubt. See, I squarely blame the way the Indian family situation is. Please bear with me for saying that. A typical Indian mother thinks she has to spoil the child. Yes, sir, true or false? That fellow who grows up close to the university doesn't even know how to switch on a washer dryer. How do you think that any Indian girl will marry him? Or any girl will marry him? No more. It's a mistake. So, see, as a housewife, what you should do. But you should allow things to be done by others also. Otherwise, you will never have no time at all. Sorry to say. If you think that I have to take care of my child, I take care of my child. No doubt it is. But the child has to be given certain amount of independence and maturity. You do it yourself. Today also I did, when I was staying, I told the boy, Keshav is here? Keshav. Okay, not you. Okay. He's doing some work, I think. I know you don't do this. So mother was very anxious. Can I? No. Because we always think that by doing everything for a person, that person will love me. In fact, you are spoiling that person. So, it is necessary that individuals have to take responsibilities in the household also. And thereby, you have to find your time to get your mind in order. If you are so occupied with only doing things, you will never find. I am not saying that you are, as you said rightly in the last line, it's not a malice or anything evil, but my mind is too active. Yes, because you are not allowing things to happen. You do it. Once in a while, you tell your husband, do your breakfast. You will suffer, no doubt. Your husband is here. Yeah, why not? Otherwise, you will never find the time. By the time you find your time, you will be already 75. Vruddhastava chintasakta. How do you remain mindful if surrounded by mindless people? Especially at work. Annapurna. Every year. Now find out in your table how many of them are there. How do you say they are mindless? They don't do their work. And you won't live up to it.
I don't know, it almost seems like you try and practice all these principles of spirituality at work, but in a typical workplace, you don't often come across people who pause and think or behave in a way or act in a way that we are guided here by the principles of Vedanta or spirituality. I'm not that I live up to any lofty principles, but when you try to attempt to practice spirituality in your life, you find that you become a little bit different. You become informed by your own divine consciousness and such. And sometimes you try and play it that way, it works, but you find that you're often the odd person out.
Yeah, that is true. See,
So,
Gita,
how do you balance that?
Krishna also makes this point. Na buddhi bedam janeyet ajnanam karma sangila joshayet sarva karmani buddhva mukta samachara. He cautions Arjuna, do not unsettle the mind of people attached to work about karma yoga. Don't. It is not for you to preach others. Na buddhi bedam janeyet ajnanam karma sangila. Those who are out of ignorance, attached to work, they will not understand what you are saying. Therefore, he says, you do yourself demonstrate. Joshayet sarva karmani, engage in action enthusiastically. Vidwan yukta samachara, performing yourself best. Our own Gurudev also, so many times he spoke from his, from the lectures, etc. How many of them do you think will actually have already fallen and actually followed him? Once he was asked this question, Swamiji, you have been giving lecture for the past 42 years. Do you think in your life a person actually changed because of what you said? Yes, he said, one person who never missed a single lecture of mine. That's the only person I'm sure of. Others I'm not sure. So, even though I know, it is not necessary others should also know it, or others should follow it, if they want. Many times Gurudev was asked this question, Swamiji, how is that around you, in the organization, there are so many egoistic people around you? He said, doctor can never complain about patients. All the time only patients. Now, obviously, that is your job. So, do not worry about the people around me not being aware of all these things. They won't be. So what? Let me do my best. And let me be an example for others. Even at home also, many people say, Swamiji, how do I teach the children to do this? How do I teach? Why not you live? Let you show what is to be done. Instead of just telling them, best form of teaching is living. They will see it. Right? So that's the easiest way to teach people. What? I read somewhere. How many people really became calm because you told them to be calm? Fine. Be calm down. Who are you? And again, Annapurna. What are the traits of a mindful person? And why is the mind such a dominant force? See, as I said, it is we who has given importance to this mind. We who have given importance. But by itself it is not. Do you think the thought will come to you without you allowing it to happen? If that is the case, find a shrink. Find a psychiatrist. Because you think, one person said, when I gave a lecture of similar kind, I said, your thought is yours, not anybody else's. No, Swamiji, my wife is creating the thought. I said, you are the first person to go to the psychiatrist. If I think somebody else is creating thought in my mind, so nobody else is creating thought. Nobody has the right, nobody has the access. Can I have an access to your mind? Many people ask this question, Swami, do you read mind? I said, I am finding for difficult with my own mind. Why should I take your mind also into it? I have better business to do. So, yeah. So the question is, what are the traits of a mindful person? You cannot externally know it. That person is, as I said, at will is at calm. He can let go of the thoughts without any unceremoniously, without any regret. Even the best thought, even most noble thought, he will be let go. He will be able to let go. See, many people, when they sit for meditation, they keep a writing pad also next to them. Because they think nice thoughts are coming at that time. Then you can never meditate. Any thought that comes, Shanaihi uparame buddhya dhritigrihi atma samstam manakritva na kinchita vichintati. Krishna is very clear. Don't think of anything. Slowly withdraw and whatever be the thought, good or bad, give up. So any preoccupation is mindlessness. Sorry, mind. Okay, where the mind to the front. Okay. Is sleeping mind conscious of time? Whether in immediate meditative state or unintentionally. Anjan. Finally we come here. Slowly it comes from this. What's that mind conscious of time? Oh yeah, no, time is up. How long should I go on? 650. So is the sleeping mind conscious of time? Do you think? Are you conscious of time while sleeping? I do not. You are not conscious of time, right? If you are conscious of time, you are not sleeping. So in the state of meditation also, yes, that's why I said it is, I remember Ramana Maharshi gave a beautiful example of this. He said, you know, when you go in the Ramanashram, you go, the Tiruvannamalai, when you go for a production, what do you call that? The Girivala. He said that you will find many of the houses in that area, doors and windows are open, everybody is sleeping inside because of the heat. You think that in this part of the world you cannot keep the doors and windows open and go to sleep. Can you? So what it means is, faculties are available, mind is absent. That is meditation. You see, but you don't register. You hear, it doesn't disturb your mind. So where the eyes and ears are not necessarily to be closed, but mind is withdrawn from that. So in the book also, I have given the exercise on that, how to do that. The main character practices with the Swami how to withdraw the attention. So in the seat of meditation, it's not necessarily akin to sleep, but it almost comes to that point of where in the sleep you shut down, not see, not to hear, not to taste, smell, touch, thing, etc. Whereas in meditation, faculties are open, attention is not. So, time is not aware in the state of meditation, as well as no external stimuli coming into him to disturb, even though faculties are open. Okay. Hari Om Swami. Sridhar Chavan. Come here. Hari Om Swami. How to align worldly goals with spiritual goals? Meaning, being a karma yogi in this world. Correct? You know, when you are studying in the school or university, they don't talk about spiritual growth, do they? They talk about how to become a good engineer, good software person, how to become a good lawyer. So, they talk about how to do your best in your field of knowledge. They don't talk about spiritual growth. But then when we get introduced to the spiritual goal, we have to reprioritize things. You cannot live keeping your professional goals predominant, and then say, I want to be spiritual as well. See, that is the reason why Lokesmin Vivita Nishta Pura Prokta Maya Naga Jnana Yogena Sankyana Karma Yogena Yogina. Krishna very clearly said there are two paths, Jnana and Karma. Samuchaya is not possible according to Shankaracharya. But what it means is that, yes, I have the karma action to do in this world for a particular purpose, which will help me to move towards the spiritual world. It's a successive two different things to be done. Because you and I are not living in isolation. We are part of the world. Right? So we have things to do. But only thing is, these things that I do, will it enable me to reach my spiritual goal easily? So we have to reprioritize. Without that, it will, on its own, it will not happen. So one has to become aware. Oh, Chetana. Oh, you yourself wrote so much. In Upadeshara, we learned that the mind is a flow of thoughts, each thought has a Ahamvriti, is it? plus a predicate, an object. The I thought subject is constant, both the object and the subject is aware of the change. So I thought is Sakshi. So Sakshi is Brahman. Does the English word soul translate to Jiva or Atma? So the subject is I and the object is Aham and Idam. Okay. In this, if the I thought is constant, okay, but the object is, both the object and the subject is aware of the change. Change of what?
Changes in the predicate, changes in the object.
Okay, if the subject is constant, only constant know which is inconstant. The subject doesn't change according to the object. Okay, so I thought is Sakshi. Okay. So this Sakshitva is while the mind is at the very subtle level. For example, I'm talking to you. Am I aware of the talking? Yes. Then there is a one in me which is aware while the another in me is actually talking. Let us take that as an example. Dvasvaparna Saita Sakaya Samanam Vrikshe Parisashtvajati. It is said in Mundokopanishad that there are two birds. One is eating all the fruits, another is watching. This is how the simile goes. The one which is eating the fruit is suffering if it is the fruit is not good. Another, at the same time, when it eats a nice fruit, it is enjoying. While the other one does not participate, it's just watching. So the one which is watching there is Ishvara, the Lord in us. And the one which is basically going through all these things is a Jiva. Though this simile shows that there are two things actually, but really speaking, they are not two, they are two levels. But simultaneously functioning. There are not two eyes in me which are independent of each other. That is where it becomes a little abstract. If there are two, then there is no problem. But there are not two. That's not a problem actually. So here the higher I, that is constantly aware of its own lower nature. Please understand that. It's not another one. Its own lower nature. As and when I slip from my own awareness, I get into the lower nature. Krishna calls it as Apara Prakriti and Para Prakriti. Bhumi Rapo Nalo Vayu Kammano Buddhi Devacha Hankara Idiyame. That is called Apara Prakriti. Para Prakriti is the one which is watching that. So, if we recognize that, then there are no two. But once I slip myself from my Para Prakriti or higher nature, I come to get involved in the objective world. So, this faculty of lower nature is what is referred as Jiva. It itself is Atman. When it loses its the false nature, it comes to rediscover its own. It is like, I give an example. You are standing in front of a mirror and the mirror shows a reflection. There are two there. There are two or one. Then you are seeing it. Just because I see doesn't mean there are two. Isn't it? When the mirror is gone, how many are there? So, in the same way, when the mind is gone, there are no two, there is only one.
Can this is the last one. No name. No name. Thank you. Conflict between past, present, how do I handle that? Amit. No. Why there is a conflict between past and present?
I have friends or relatives who were part of my past, and I have friends who are part of my present. And so when they come together, there is typically conflict. So how do I address that?
Why are you bothered? Let them fight. You are in conflict to whom to go with. Is it so?
I want both of them, want both of those friends to be a part of my life.
I got it. See, what happened was, last year I went to Bangalore, and through the Facebook I came to know about my school day friends. Okay, so they were there in the same city. So after 30 years I met them. Okay, they have not changed a bit. Not that I think or anything. Probably yes, according to them. So when I met them, one of my friends used to smoke, and he continued to smoke. I know that they are still living in the same condition where I left them. Nothing changed. Maybe their physical body has changed, they got married, they got children, they are working or whatever. But their basic characteristics never changed. So I had no conflict with them. I accepted. Because that's what they are. So the conflict comes when you don't accept. Correct? If you understand that that's what they are, hopefully they will pray for them. Hopefully they will come out of it. So that's all it is. There's nothing to worry about. Asuna Matata. Meena Shankar. No. How do you influence your grown-up children to have spiritual goals? Along with professional goals. So that we have been discussing. See, fortunately the children that are growing up here have got the exposure to, we did not have when we were growing up. So at least that much you should be content in that. And as Gurudev always would say, that you put the seed in them, it will grow, not now, today, tomorrow. It will grow over a period of time. So we have to do that. Being teenagers or being youth, you cannot expect them to fundamentally change their immediate goals because they are surrounded by people at the university or wherever they are, and they are going to be influenced by those kind of environment. You cannot do it, you cannot change it. Because you have put the seed already by the help of Swamiji and many others who have talked to them through Balvihar, etc., they will have their seeds well sown. And therefore, they will germinate at some point of time to give them the right perception. Okay, I will just finish this answer. Hamsa Balaji. Dear Swamiji, who's Hamsa Balaji? Oh. Namaskar. How do you practice meditation when you have physical discomfort, like chronic pain or allergies? Take a painkiller. Anyway, so, bodily ailments are easily overcome than mental ailments. At least your mind, not you, anybody. At least mind is in place, that is good. People who have problem with their mind, then it's so difficult for them to even focus on it. Forget about body things. So definitely there will be bodily pain, etc. will be there, but try to overcome, minimize the effort or minimize your exhaustion, and see whether you can adjust your daily life in such a way that you don't get those pains, or take medicine to overcome it. Once you start enjoying the inner quietude through meditation, you will be able to access it in spite of the pain that is there. So that is how the great Mahatmas have proved, even though their physical body is, Gurudev himself, with so much of discomfort in his body, he never lost his cheerfulness. That only shows it is possible for us to do that. It's only proven. Last but one. This big one I am not taking. Just yourself. Vanaja. How do you differentiate between your duties and letting go of things? The duties are decided by what you give importance at any given point of time. Like if there is a child who is studying is the duty. Right? So if you are a householder, the wife or the husband, then that is the primary duty according to you at that stage. That is called Swadharma. Bhagavan Krishna says Swadharma is important, but Swarupa Dharma is also important. Swarupa Dharma is to know yourself. In fact, he says that when you rightly have the knowledge of your Swarupa, your original nature, it doesn't come on the way of your Swadharma. In fact, it makes your Swadharma better. As a wife, you have to take care of your husband, or mother, you have to take care of your children, etc. You consider that as a deviation from your spiritual pursuit. Yes and no at the same time. In a way that if you do not know that your spiritual goal actually does not stop you from what you are doing, it can be imbibed into it. Yat karoshi yadashnasi yajjuhosi dadasi yade yat tapasyasi kaunteya tat purushva madarpanam. Whatever you do it for me. If Krishna says that, so when I am doing the work of a householder, it can be directed towards God only. Tell your husband that I am not cooking for him, I am cooking for God. Is he here? So whether he likes it or not, he has to eat your food, right? Because you cook for Lord, not for him. So he cannot complain about salt being less or more. Anyway, I'm just joking. So, if the spiritual awareness is there, no action will come and interfere. So, letting go is only selfishness. The selfish part of that duty should be let go, not the duties. What does Krishna say? Hey, do your work, remove the selfishness there. He doesn't say just to do your duty and then go and sit in Himalaya. Do your duty in that selfishness state. Asakto hi acharan karna paramam. Thank you so much for your patient listening. Sorry, I could not answer few of the questions because name is not there. I would prefer to address the person who asked the question so that it is easy for me to direct it. So if I have not answered your question because your name was not there, sorry for it. Also, thank you.